Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in this afternoon. So we are going to present our research work that has been a body of work that we've been working on for a while during our time as undergrads. So our study was looking at the effect of music listening on cognitive inhibition, and I'll take you a little bit through the background of this study. You can go to the next slide. So, a little bit of background. Cognitive inhibition, for those of you that aren't familiar, is going to be the ability for you to filter out any irrelevant stimuli that's going on in your environment. So, to really be able to focus on the task that you're paying attention to and tune out any other different things that are going on around you, whether that's music, other people, other tasks. And this is something that can be elicited in the Stroop task, which we'll hear Emma explain a little bit on that later. And so, in terms of kind of what the background research says, they find varying links between music listening and cognitive performance. Some studies might suggest that background music could play a role in modulating inhibitory control, while others do find conflicting results. And so, we're really kind of going into the study, wanted to determine which type of background music could really affect cognitive inhibition, because that hasn't really been studied quite yet. So, Molly, you can go ahead and go to the next slide. So the purpose of our study was that we wanted to analyze the effect that listening to preferred music has on cognitive inhibition in healthy younger and in healthy older adults. So we hypothesized that listening to preferred music will result in greater accuracy and decreased reaction times on the Stroop task compared to no music and unfamiliar music.
All right, and I will talk to you about the participants. So the first is the healthy young adults, which there were 30 of them, and they were between the ages of 18 and 35. The exclusion criteria for the healthy young adults was a Beck's depression inventory, the mini mental status examination, and the color blindness test. So the mean age was around 20 with a standard deviation of 1.31. There was 63% female and 37% male, with ethnicity being 93% Caucasian, 3.5% were mixed, and 3.5% were African American. Then taking the next slide, which is healthy older adults, which we had 13 of those. They were between the ages of 55 and 85. It was the same exclusion criteria of the Beck's depression inventory, the Minty mental status examination, and the color blindness test, with the mean age being around 66 with a standard deviation of 5.96. And there were 7 female participants and 6 male participants. And I think Emma will do the next slide.
Okay, sorry, I was muted. Here we go. First, I will just explain kind of what the Stroop task is, and then I'll go into a little bit more detail about what we did for our data collections. So the Stroop task is a cognitive task, and the main goal of it, you're trying to identify the color of the word that you see. So not the word, but the color that the ink is written in. So the Stroop task that we used, it presented words in 3 different ways. There were 3 different conditions that were seen during each trial, kind of randomly. And so the neutral condition, that was kind of just unfamiliar words that people probably wouldn't recognize. So the example on the right side of that table is the word helot, and then you can see that that word is written in red. So the black word indicates what you would choose for that certain word, and it'll show on the next slide. It was just using a keyboard, so you would just click the red button on that one. And then the congruent condition, this was the condition where the color of the word you were seeing matched the word itself. So our example is the word red written in the color red. And then lastly, the incongruent condition, this was where the color of the word did not match the word. So as you can imagine, even probably just from looking at the example, this is the one that really makes you think. And this is the one that measures that cognitive inhibition that Allison talked about. So our example here would be the word green written in red, and when you saw that, you'd have to kind of filter through that and be able to identify red or choose red. So for our data collection, there's a picture of the keyboard that I mentioned earlier. The Stroop task was done on a computer. So prior to coming in, the participants sent us 5 preferred songs they enjoyed listening to, and they were asked to choose a song that was kind of upbeat or high tempo for that. And then out of the 5 that we were given, we randomly selected one of those songs to use during our collection. So participants first completed a practice session. They would just see, I think it was X's or a cross, just a symbol to kind of choose the colors and just get familiar with the setup, make sure they were comfortable using the keyboard. And then after that initial practice session, they did 3 conditions. The order of conditions were randomized. And one was listening to self-reported, that preferred music that I mentioned before. One was listening to unfamiliar piano music, which was also at a high tempo. And then one they did while listening to no music at all.
Okay, so I will be talking just briefly about the data analysis that we did. So the data that we collected, or the primary outcomes of our study from the Stroop Task, were the outcome of reaction time, and this was measured in milliseconds. So this is just how quickly a person responded after seeing the word, so the time that they saw it to the time that they were able to press the button of the corresponding key and answer. And then accuracy is just, as it says, it's how accurate they were in their choosing of the correct color for the word. And then in terms of statistics, we used the 3x2 repeated measures ANOVA.
Okay, so I'm going to go over our results. So these are the results that we got for accuracy. There were no significant differences between music conditions for any of the Stroop conditions. Healthy older adults were more accurate than healthy young adults, and this difference was actually significant in the neutral Stroop condition. So that's the bottom graph you see. You can go to the next slide. So these are our reaction time results, and there were no significant differences between music conditions for any of the Stroop conditions for reaction time, but there were significant differences between healthy older adults and healthy young adults for all 3 Stroop conditions. Healthy older adults were slower, so they took a longer time to respond to the stimulus than healthy young adults did. So the findings of our study did not support our hypothesis, and it suggests that listening to preferred background music neither enhances nor disrupts cognitive inhibition, and we did see an age effect, which we expected to see. To our knowledge, results from the study are the first to show that listening to preferred music does not have beneficial effects on cognitive inhibition. Further studies will explore whether preferred music enhances inhibitory control in Parkinson's disease.
So just to finish off, we want to, again, thank you all for coming today. We're excited to see everyone, even virtually, and get to share with you what we've been working on for the past few years. Particularly, of course, we want to thank Dr. Stegemuller for all that she's done. And a special thank you to now Dr. Patricia Isbicki. We're so excited for her, and we are so thankful to have been able to work with her, and she's helped us tremendously in this project. And then, of course, thankful for our friends and family, including all of our folks at the Parkinson's disease outreach groups. You guys are just such a joy to work with, and we all look forward to it, and it's a big part of why we got into this research. And of course, thanking the many study participants that helped us out by coming in and doing our study. So yes, thanks again for watching, and we'll be glad to answer any questions, I think, at the end, if anyone has any.
I have a question. The number of subjects in the older adults was very small. I'm surprised that you got such a result for that small a sample.
Yeah, I don't know, Cortney, do you have any insight there?
Yeah, so we tried to get 30 was our goal, but because of coronavirus, we had to cut the study short. So we just analyzed the data that we had gotten up to that point, and that's what we had to work with.
Thank you.
All right, I think our presentation is next, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen if there's no other questions for that first group. All right, give me 1 second. All right, can everybody see that? Perfect. All right, hi everybody, good afternoon. Sadly, Natalie couldn't be here because of a final exam conflict, so I'm going to be presenting this myself, but Natalie and I did work together on all of this data processing and everything that I'm going to talk about. So for our study, we looked at the effects of pre-recorded group therapeutic singing program on swallowing in people with Parkinson's disease. So dysphagia, or difficulty swallowing, is a debilitating symptom in people with Parkinson's disease. And through previous research and studies done, we have seen that therapeutic group singing in a live group does improve muscle activity associated with swallowing in persons with Parkinson's disease. And this suggests that maybe a virtual version or pre-recorded version of this could maybe benefit as well. Since there is limited access, especially in a time as like now where we can't be together in a group setting, maybe a virtual approach would be a good option. So we wanted to determine if a pre-recorded group therapeutic singing program, or we're going to be calling it GTS, or I'm going to be calling it GTS, sorry, has the same benefits as the live program that we already studied. The purpose of our study, just like I said, is to analyze that effect, see if it does improve the swallow muscles, the EMG results of the swallow muscles in persons with Parkinson's disease, and whether the program will provide the same results as previously shown. For this, we hypothesize that the pre-recorded group therapeutic singing program will improve the muscle activity associated with swallowing. For our study, we had only 6 participants with Parkinson's disease, and each completed 3 trials. So you can see some of our demographics of our participants, mean age being 71.5, 17% female, 83% male, and a mean disease duration of about 8 years. So for the intervention, participants were presented with that pre-recorded 8-week group therapeutic singing program, which they then would watch and participate in virtually 1 time per week to make sure that there were no technical difficulties, and to take kind of attendance, there was a staff member there to help with anything like that. For the data collection itself, the assessments were performed 1 week prior to beginning the 8-week program and 1 week after the completion of that same 8-week program. Participants were given either 10 milliliters of water. I'll be talking a little bit more about the thick and the thin swallow in the results section, but water was the thin swallow condition, and pudding was the thick swallow condition. They were asked to hold the bolus of water or pudding in their mouth until instructed to swallow, and then swallowing when told to do so. We used EMG, surface EMG, to capture the swallow muscle action, and it was placed on the right and left submental and laryngeal muscles. Like I said earlier, 3 trials were performed for each muscle, side, and condition. So this figure 1 shows a little bit of what we were able to see through our EMG results that we collected. But we're going to be focusing on just this one value here in the middle, which is the peak EMG. We did collect all of this data and would like to analyze more, but because of time constraints, we weren't able to, so we are just focusing on that peak EMG. For our statistical analysis, we specifically analyzed the peak EMG amplitude for the submental muscle, and we did both the thick and the thin swallow conditions, and we did them separately. Analysis was done using a paired t-test for each condition, and we calculated standard error and set our alpha value at 0.05. Moving on to the results, as you can see by these graphs here, There was some difference between the pre and the post. However, neither of ours yielded a significant difference. So our first p-value that we got was 0.35 for the thin swallow and 0.37 for the thick swallow. So as you can see down here in our discussion, our results indicated no statistically significant difference between the pre and the post assessment in either thick or thin swallow, and our hypothesis was then not supported. However, because of time constraints, our small sample population and everything like that, we would like to do further research and look at those EMG values that we collected and maybe create a bigger sample size to see if that could affect our results. So yeah, any questions anybody has?
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I was wondering, looking at the results, it seems like there's high variability or higher variability in the pre-data as compared to the post-data. Do you have any ideas to what could be causing that?
Yeah, that's a great point. We did find that especially in the thin submental muscle, there was a high standard error, which is what those bars mean, so variance. And we did have to eliminate a few outliers in our data, as well as where this big variance came from. There was one other data point that was kind of an intermediate in that between an outlier, actual outlier that we were finding, and our congruent samples and everything like that. So and yes, like you said, there is a much smaller standard error. We're not exactly sure. Some of that could be technical difficulties. We did have some trouble reading some of the EMG data and just getting noise in the background of that EMG data. So having to throw out a few of our data samples for that. And we found that there's a lot more in the pre. So that could have been because for this, they had to travel to get to the different locations where these virtual programs were being held. And during that pre, maybe there wasn't as much knowledge into how the machinery works, and that could definitely be caused by technical difficulties. And the participants kind of at the post collection, they knew a little bit more of what was coming. Maybe it was just a communication issue in our study and stuff like that. So those are all things that we would like to look more into, and maybe changing our outlier set again, maybe taking out that one outlier in that pre-test that gave us this big standard error. But yeah, that's a really good point.
Okay, thank you.
I think we have one more presentation, and I'll hand it over to them. If there's any other questions, again, at the end, you can ask questions for all of the groups.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. So my group members and I were researching the effects of preferred music on different tempos of fatigue. And we'd just like to say that we are all freshmen, first years in the lab, and this was our project for this semester. But unfortunately, due to the coronavirus, we actually collected all of our data in our houses and at home. So it was a little unconventional, but we're excited to share with you the results that we found. And Sarah's gonna start us off.
Starting with some background, previous research suggests that music can elicit a variety of positive benefits such as motivation and enjoyment. And with an aging population, there's an increased need for rehabilitation. And it's been shown that listening to preferred music while exercising can decrease fatigue. So we kind of want to take a look at that. However, with limited research that exists, that discusses how long listening to different tempos of music will while exercising affects fatigue. Okay, so starting with our purpose, the purpose of the study was to determine how self-selected preferred music on different tempos, so we did fast and slow, affected fatigue and how long you could do an exercise task. We did wall squats specifically. Our hypothesis, we hypothesized that performing a wall squat to a self-selected upbeat song will reduce fatigue, resulting in a longer wall squat time compared to listening to a slower song or no music at all. And then I'll turn it over to Megan. I think you're going next.
It's me. So for our experiment, for our participant demographics, we tested healthy young adults between the ages of 14 and 19 for a total of 7 participants, and we had 3 that performed the squats to preferred upbeat music and 4 that performed squats to the preferred slow music. And 57% of our participants were female and 43% were male, while the average age among the participants was 17. So our participants performed moderate exercise on average around 2 to 3 days per week and vigorous exercise 2 days a week. And then none of the participants exercised on the day that they were tested, and the only injury among participants was a shoulder injury, in which we concluded did not have an impact on the participants' performance. And then before we began testing, we asked the participants to bring/submit us 2 songs, one that they would listen to while they were exercising, which would be the more upbeat song, and then one that they would listen to before sleeping or when they wanted to relax, which was our slower song. And then after that, participants were asked to complete a survey that was asking them about their activity levels, their gender, height, weight, and their background. And so after the survey was completed, the participants were instructed to stretch any lower body muscles as they desired. And once they were ready, they were asked to perform a wall sit in proper form, which is your feet flat on the floor, your legs at a 90-degree angle, your back and shoulders flat against the wall, and then your arms crossed against your chest. And they were asked to do that for as long as they could. And then after the first trial was complete, the participants were given a 5-minute recovery time to rest their muscles so they would be able to perform again. And then the first trial, the participants did not listen to any music. And in the second trial, participants had either the upbeat song or the slow beat song based upon our randomizer. And then the trials were being timed when the correct form was achieved and then ended when the correct form was no longer being attained.
So for our outcome measures, we looked at the average trial time for the participants who were assigned the upbeat music and also the slow music. And we also looked at the average change score for slow music versus the upbeat music. And finally, we ran a test on the Spotify website to find the average beats per minute for the upbeats and slow songs. We averaged that for each of our participants. And then, so what we did for our data analysis was that we recorded each trial and then calculated the averages, and we also calculated change score and then calculated standard deviation as well. So none of our results had any statistical significance, but if you look at the graphs, you can see that for the slow music, the participants who were assigned that category, they did not increase their time on their second wall sit, but the participants who were assigned to the upbeat condition did increase their time on their second wall sit, and you can see that as well in our average change score. And then we think it's interesting, the average beats per minute. All about the upbeat songs, we did see that they had, on average, a greater beats per minute than the slow songs did. So our results show that participants who listened to self-selected upbeat music during their second trial did increase the time of their wall sit, and those who listened to the self-selected slow music did not increase the time of their second wall sit. So some of the limitations that we noticed were that we had a very small sample size due to the fact that we were collecting at home, but we also noticed that we were collecting in an uncontrolled environment since we couldn't be in the lab making sure everything was perfect to how we wanted it. And our participants also noticed that they had been having abnormal exercise habits due to the coronavirus, where many of them mentioned they would normally exercise on a daily basis. A lot of them weren't because of the gyms being closed in different situations. So that was something we also wanted to note. And It is also important to look at that 3 of our 4 participants who were assigned the slow music had the 3 longest trial times for the first wall sit. So none of them increased their trial time for the second trial. And we'd like to further look into if this was due to the fact that they were truly listening to a slow tempoed song or just the fact that they were fatigued still after the 5 minutes from the first trial. So we hypothesized that the participants who listened to upbeat self-selected music would have a longer wall squat trial time than those who listened to slow self-selected music, and this was supported by our data, but we would like to continue doing additional research and really look at the effects of listening to preferred music on fatigue and see if those will become more evident and eventually maybe look at it being applied to a rehabilitation setting, among others, to increase participant motivation. So thank you for listening to our project, and if there's any questions, we'd be happy to answer those for you.
Megan, this is Patricia. So was there any other differences in the musical characteristics that you saw, or did you just look at the beats per minute using that Spotify tool?
Yeah, we just looked at the beats per minute for our project, but I personally looked at it more, and there was a couple outliers. One slow song that was listened to had like an upbeat song had like 75 beats per minute. So if we continue doing this, we would want to like put parameters on it ahead of time to categorize that. But we also I looked at some of like the energy, there's the energy category and stuff like that, and most of them did fit in with being truly like faster or slower, which was interesting.